Hi, my name is Tina Savage. Today is August 8th of 2023. I'm going to call my stakeholders up now to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Denise O'Day. I'm Superintendent of Schools of USD 108.
And I'm Brock Funk. I'm the 712 principal here at Washington County.
Thank you, Mr. Funk and Mrs. O'Day. And welcome to my Master of Education in Curriculum and Instruction Teaching Technologies Action Research presentation. Today, I'm going to be sharing my thought process and my motivation for choosing my action research topic. My action research focused on formative assessment and feedback strategies and their impact on student problem-solving skills. My action research question was, will the implementation of formative assessment and feedback strategies improve problem-solving skills in 8th grade physical science students as determined by summative assessment? I'll also be explaining my research methods, looking over the data, the analysis of that data, and the conclusions, and sharing some of my thoughts and plans going forward. So why did I choose to focus on problem-solving skills? I've had a passion and a belief that improving student problem-solving skills is critically important for our students. So in my classes, I focus on problem-solving quite a bit. So I'm not the only one. If you take a look at current studies, you'll find that many researchers also support the importance of these skills. For example, if you take a look at the article, A Look at Complex Problem Solving in the 21st Century by Kunze, Stadler, and Grief in 2018, they analyzed the recent studies and they found a very strong link between complex problem solving and student academic success. They also noted that these strategies are extremely desired in the workplace. So improving those skills for our students gives them a leg up for being successful as they move off into the workplace and into society. Why did I select formative assessment as my teaching strategy? It's also based in scholarly research. So my instructional materials are based on the textbook for my class in the spring of 2022, Feedback and Goal Setting. That textbook by Ruiz, Primo, and Burkhart, called Using Feedback to Improve Learning, gives the framework that I used for my study. It has 3 questions. First, where am I going? Then, where am I now? And last, where to next? So for where am I going, we take a look at the learning goals and the success criteria for problem solving in my classroom, and I developed those for these lessons. For where am I now, that's the formative assessment and feedback process. So I give the formative assessment, I collect the evidence from the student, and I use that to give them that feedback, that targeted, that balanced, that useful feedback that they can use to move forward. And then finally, where to next? So for that step, I had the students actually develop a SMART goal. And in that SMART goal, they had to have an action plan. I gave them a lot of suggestions for different ways that they could improve each of those success criteria areas. And they would pick the ones that they would want to put into their action plan. So between each assessment in this unit, I would have them go through that process. So that was my methods. My participants were my 8th grade physical science students in cohort years of 2021 and 2022. The 2021 group acted as my control and the 2022 group was my test group. The only difference between them was the instruction for the 2022 group included this formative assessment and feedback process. The data comes from summative assessments from the force and motion unit in that 8th grade physical science class. Assessment 1 data is the first summative assessment of that unit. So I've given instruction. The summative assessment for that first section of instruction was the data for assessment 1. For assessment 2, it was actually the third summative assessment from that unit. We're going to take a look now at the results in these graphs on my chart. So if you take a look up here on the left, this is a comparison of the control group and the test group for their mean improvement. For the control group, they had a 4.5% improvement in their problem-solving skills from assessment 1 to assessment 2. For the test group, it's 12%. And yeah, that's significantly higher. What concerned me about that is that this group also started much lower. So was it actually the formative assessment and feedback instruction, or was it just the fact that they had a lot farther to go? So I dug a little deeper. I have the quartile assessment, but even before we get to that, I took a look at individual students. And on my control group, there was one student with 100% on assessment 1. There was also one student with 100% on assessment 2. In my test group, there were no students that scored 100% in their problem-solving section of assessment 1. But there were 7 out of 20 students who scored a perfect grade on assessment 2. And to me, that was significant evidence that these strategies are effective. Okay, if we take a look at the quartile, it follows that out. We see much greater improvement in quartile 1, quartile 2, and quartile 3 for our test group. The test group showed a 7.6%, 26.3%, and 20.5% improvement in those quartiles, where the control group was 0.8, 9.8, and 6.5 respectively. So yes, the quartile says that also. The area that is a problem here is when we look at the fourth quartile. The bottom 25% did not show improvement. As a matter of fact, for the test group, they actually showed a 6.4% decline on that summative assessment. So that is one area that we'll definitely be looking at in the future. All right, dropping down here to the statistical analysis. This is the normal curve for each of the two assessments. This is each of the two groups. This is your improvement curve for the control group. This is the improvement curve for the test group. And this space in between there is what represents that statistical improvement. That is a 0.38 effect size. That number falls into the small but approaching medium effect size category. So what does that mean? Right up here in our conclusions, we can say that the regular use of formative assessment and feedback strategies does positively impact student problem-solving skills. Okay, the limitations of this study, the one thing that is the problem for this data is the fact that my sample size is very small. I only had the 17 students in my control group. I only had the 20 students in my test group. Those small numbers do affect the reliability of the statistical analysis. But I still do feel that it does say that there is an impact. All right, what do I plan for the future? Well, first, I'm going to be taking a look at what strategies I can use that specifically improve skills for the bottom quartile, the bottom 25% of students. The data shows me that that's an area that definitely needs improvement in my instruction. I'm going to keep the rest of it and keep using it for this year. So that will be the change that I put in there. And this is the question that I'm going to have then. Will the use of targeted strategies for the lowest quartile help improve their problem-solving skills? So I'll be working on that. Then another question is, will the use of formative assessment and feedback strategies also help improve student content knowledge retention in other areas, including my life science class? So that is my action research. What questions can I answer for you?
I just want to say first, very, very impressive stuff here.
I would agree.
I think even, you talked about that quartile. Yeah, they weren't as successful as the other three, but I still think, like you said, that's valuable information. So then you can go back and kind of figure it out and more individualized instruction for those kids. So the other three quartile, that's wow.
And the fact that you had 7 who scored 100%.
Yeah.
And one of those students went from a 38.1% to 100. And that student actually, I had offered tutoring to all of the students, but especially to the students that had performed pretty low on that first assessment, and that student took advantage of it. So they went from a 38.1% to 100% in those two assessments.
How did they respond to that?
They were very happy. Yeah, and I definitely communicated to them how impressive that is, that they put in the effort and this is how it pays off. So, yeah, that was great. That was one of those things as a teacher that is very rewarding. And even with this right here, going through this whole process and taking a look at the data, which we should do more, was definitely a good confirmation for those strategies. I will be using feedback, effective feedback, a lot more this year. Yeah. Other questions?
I know you, in the motivation piece there, you kind of talked about problem solving as one of those skills that employers say people are lacking. What do you think, like, is behind that? Is it, is it the internet age with Google? Everything's just immediate right there for us, or we get to?
I think that the current studies, I mean, they're not going to be clear on giving us even clear. Some are going to say, we don't see that there's a gap in the skills out there.
Yeah.
But really, when you start talking to employers, and that's what a lot of my research focused on, is where's the information coming from? Because our state of Kansas used that same strategy.
Yeah.
So when we take a look at that, I think it is pretty clear that the impression, whether it's real or just, their own thought, is that the secondary and post-secondary education system is just not meeting the needs of our students in that area. So that's why I'm like, well, what can I do?
Yeah.
So that's where that motivation came
Yeah.
from.
In post-secondary, they're more content-driven. It's not, they don't, but that's probably something they should look at. Hey, let's develop these.
And I think they
skills
are.
further.
Yeah, from my studies here, I think they are
Well,
really
that's
pushing
good.
students to be much more in that realm of
Yeah.
critical thinking and problem solving.
I have another question for you. What do you think say at our school here, if we did like a school-wide approach to problem solving or implementing that into each and every classroom, no matter what your content area is, what do you think the impact would be, just as a whole?
I think there'd be a way to find that concept, probably in every classroom, how to implement the instructional strategies and what component of that problem solving they address is different. I was looking at it in terms of their 8th grade is doing a lot of algebra and pre-algebra stuff, and so using formulas in a physical science class fits perfectly into that part of the math curriculum. So problem solving and critical thinking are big concepts in science, but they're not part of our standards. So this is reinforcing or building on the standards that fit into our math curriculum and targeting a thing in there. And it just meshes well for me. But I think the other teachers could definitely find areas to build that. And we know communication, critical thinking and problem solving, and collaboration. I mean, these 21st century skills are a big focus for our education system.
So how will what you've learned here, how's this going to shape your teaching in the future?
I'm much more data-driven, and that was part of what this degree taught me, is that you need to look at the numbers. Because just looking at the summative assessment and saying, okay, 5 kids didn't pass, that doesn't cut it. It really doesn't. And so what part of that assessment did they struggle on? And just the problem solving is only one part of a summative assessment. So looking at the numbers or data-driven decision-making is a big part of my lessons from this, and what I'll be using as I go forward, for sure. Yeah.
Has it changed your teaching style?
Just the knowledge. I think otherwise I've always had a great passion for, what are the things I think are important in this content and how can I get that across to the kids. But the methods are much more, I think, effective now because I'm looking at it and seeing, okay, is what I'm doing working? And that was part of what that textbook that I used actually said. It didn't just say use formative assessment to help kids see what they need to do. It said use formative assessment to see what you need to do. What is it that the teacher needs to do and how can they improve?